Ever look at a plane and wonder how something so massive can even get off the ground?
Me too.
And while the wings and engines get all the glory, today we're going deeper
Yeah.
into a system you rarely see but is just as vital, aircraft tubing. Using this FLNF quiz as our guide, we're about to untangle a hidden world that's crucial to every takeoff, turn, and safe landing.
It's easy to think of it as just plumbing, but this system is more like the aircraft's circulatory system, carrying fuel, oxygen, hydraulics fluid, everything it needs to function.
Right from the start, this document doesn't sugarcoat things.
Nope.
It jumps right into the cramped reality. Under the hood, or just say fuselage, we're talking fluid lines, control cables, filters, wiring bundles, all packed together, makes you appreciate the steady hands of the mechanics who work on these things.
Absolutely. And that's why precision is paramount here.
Oh,
The
yeah.
document stresses mashing materials when replacing fittings. You can't just mix and match metals, especially in a system under the kinds of pressure you find at 30,000 feet.
Talk about a high-stakes game of Lego. And speaking of precision, let's talk about how these tubes are made. I have to admit, I never thought about the specifics of tube sizing before.
It's a whole language.
Really?
Essentially, tube sizes are measured by their outside diameter in 16ths of an inch. So another 6 tube translates to a 38-inch outside diameter.
But it's the wall thickness that really caught my eye. We're talking thousandths of an inch. Suddenly, I'm back in high school geometry, trying to remember how to calculate inside diameter.
You and me both. But think of it like this. To get that inside diameter, you take the outside diameter and subtract double the wall thickness.
Oh.
It becomes second nature after a while, like learning any new skill.
All right. You've convinced me precision is key. But it's not just about size, is it? Tell me about the materials used for these critical tubes.
You've got it. The document mentions 3 main players: corrosion-resistant steel for those high-pressure situations, aluminum alloy, which you'll find in both high-pressure and general applications, and then there's copper, mainly on older aircraft. And copper, interestingly, requires a little something called annealing.
Annealing, is that like a metal massage to get the kinks out?
Close, but not quite. Imagine heating the copper to a specific temperature and then letting it cool down slowly.
Okay.
That's annealing. It softens the metal, making it more workable and less likely to crack or break under pressure.
So it's all about preventing those weak points that could lead to trouble down the line. Speaking of avoiding trouble, this document mentions a color coding system for aluminum alloy tubing. Is this purely aesthetic, or is there a method to this colorful madness?
Definitely not just for looks.
Oh, good.
Those color bands are like a mechanic's shorthand, instantly telling them what type of aluminum alloy they're dealing with, vital for maintenance and repairs.
It's like a secret language for aviation geeks. And it gets even more specific, right? The document mentions rules about the width and placement of these color bands.
Absolutely. Every detail matters. The bands can't be more than 4 inches wide, and they have to be at both ends of the tube, A and D, right in the middle. If 2 colors are needed, each gets half the width.
Wow.
No room for ambiguity here.
Talk about attention to detail. So we've got our precisely measured, meticulously color-coded tubing. What happens next? They just plug and play? Or is there more to it? It's starting to feel like these tubes are more high maintenance than I am.
Right.
But I guess that's what it takes when safety's on the line. So once you've got this perfectly sized, color-coded piece of tubing, what happens next?
Well, it's time to break out the tools. But maybe not the kind you'd expect.
Oh.
Cutting comes first. And again, precision is key. We need that end to be perfectly square. No rough edges. No burrs.
And that's where things got really interesting for me. The document mentions adding 10% to the length when replacing a section of tubing. 10%. That sounded a bit extra, like ordering a size up just in case.
I can see why you'd think that. But it's far from excessive. That extra length is crucial for something called flaring, which is how you create those secure, leak-proof connections. Without that extra bit, you're risking leaks. And when you're dealing with things like fuel or hydraulic fluid, that's not a risk you want to take.
Okay, that makes sense. Better safe than sorry, especially at 30,000 feet. But what about bending these tubes? I'm imagining some heavy-duty machinery, lasers, maybe even tiny robots.
While the world of aviation has its fair share of high-tech wonders, when it comes to bending smaller tubing, sometimes the simplest solutions are the best. Think a tightly wound steel coil spring.
Yeah, seriously, like something you'd find in my junk drawer.
Exactly, and in a pinch. This document even mentions using clean, dry sand. You pack the tube with sand, bend it carefully, and voila! It's a testament to the ingenuity of early aviation mechanics. who often had to improvise with limited materials.
Talk about resourceful.
Sure.
It's amazing to think of these seemingly low-tech solutions playing a role in something as complex as flight.
Ah,
But speaking of things that can go wrong, and this is where my inner warrior kicks in, the document mentions cold flow catastrophes.
yeah.
Sounds intense.
It can be. And it highlights how even seemingly small mistakes can have big consequences.
Oh, no.
Cold flow refers to what happens when you over-tighten clamps on rubber hoses.
No.
It can damage the hose, leading to leaks. And in a system where every connection matters, that can have a ripple effect.
So it's a domino effect. One loose clamp leading to a chain reaction.
Yeah.
It makes you realize that this system is so much more than just, well, tubes. It's this interconnected network, almost like a circulatory system, right?
Precisely. This network is responsible for carrying all those vital fluids and gases throughout the aircraft.
Right.
We're talking fuel, oil, breathing oxygen. Even the instruments rely on this system.
Wow. I never realized how much depended on these tubes. It's like they're the veins and arteries of the aircraft.
That's a great analogy. And just like our circulatory system has different types of vessels, aircraft tubing has different types of lines, each with a specific purpose.
Okay. Now you've got me really curious. Break it down for me. What are the different types of lines and what makes them unique? So we were talking about the different types of lines in an aircraft's tubing system. It's not all just one big pipe dream, huh?
Not at all. This document lays out 5 main types, each with a critical job. Supply lines, pressure lines, operation lines, return lines, and vent lines. Imagine mixing those up. It'd be chaos.
Like swapping arteries and veins. Definitely not ideal. So each line has its own designated route, its own purpose. And keeping them straight is critical. It makes sense. But who knew there was so much to it?
And the level of detail goes even deeper. The document points out that any tube carrying potentially dangerous materials has a special marking. PHDN. Think of it as a visual warning sign.
PHDN. It's short, it's memorable, and it probably prevents a lot of accidents. So a clear sign to be extra careful. Because what's flowing through those tubes isn't water.
Exactly. It's a heads up for anyone working on the aircraft that this specific tube might contain flammable, corrosive, or otherwise hazardous material. Safety first, always.
Couldn't agree more. And speaking of safety, our trusty document also talks about repairs. Specifically the difference between a quick fix and a permanent solution. It's not always a one-and-done situation, right?
You're right, and that's a key distinction in aviation maintenance. Sometimes you need to get a plane back in the air quickly, but you always have to address the root cause properly. Think of it like putting a Band-Aid on a cut. It helps in the short term,
Right.
but you wouldn't want to leave a Band-Aid on forever.
Right. You need a more permanent solution eventually. So how do they decide when a repair is enough or when it needs more serious attention?
Well, the document gives specific examples for what's considered acceptable damage for an interim repair. For instance, let's say you've got a small scratch or nick on a piece of aluminum alloy tubing. If the damage is no more than 10% of the wall thickness, you can patch it up as a temporary fix.
Okay, so a minor scratch is different from a gaping hole. Makes sense.
Yeah.
But what about dents? Those seem trickier to deal with.
You're right, dents have different criteria. The document says they can be temporarily fixed if they don't exceed 20% of the tube diameter. However, and this is crucial, location plays a big role. A dent in the wrong spot can be a much bigger deal.
It's all about location, location, location.
Funny.
Even with airplane tubes. So where would a dent be the most problematic?
The document specifically warns against dents in the heel of a bend. That's the inside curve of the bend. Where the metal is already under more stress, a dent there could weaken the tube significantly.
So even a small dent in the wrong spot could mean grounding the plane. It really drives home the point you made earlier about this system being all about precision, even down to the smallest detail.
Absolutely. And while an interim fix might buy you some time, the document is clear that a permanent replacement is still necessary down the line. It's about ensuring long-term reliability and, most importantly, safety.
Which brings us back to those packed spaces we talked about earlier. It's incredible to think about all these tubes, fittings, and procedures working together, ensuring every flight is as safe and efficient as possible.
It really highlights the interconnected nature of aircraft systems, and it underscores the crucial role this often overlooked network plays in every flight.
It's a hidden world, tucked away behind panels and beneath floorboards. Next time I'm on a plane, I'll definitely be thinking about that intricate network of tubes, quietly doing their job.
And hopefully appreciating the meticulous engineering and craftsmanship that goes into making it all work. It's a reminder that even in a world of advanced technology, the fundamentals of physics and the ingenuity of skilled professionals are still what keep us soaring through the skies.
Absolutely. Well said. And on that note, We've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of aircraft tubing. It's been enlightening, to say the least.
The pleasure was all mine. Remember, curiosity is key. There's a whole world of fascinating things to discover if you just know where to look.
Until next time, happy flying, everyone.